Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the NFL Draft Triple Take here on Steelers.com. This is a wrap-up edition. I'm Mike Prisuta from Steelers.com and the Steelers Radio Network, joined, as usual, by Dale Lolley of Steelers.com and the Steelers Radio Network, and Matt Williamson of Steelers.com and the Steelers Radio Network. You can also hear Dale and Matt co-hosting The Drive on SNR. We've been coming at you for a couple of weeks now, breaking down position by position the candidates available for selection in the upcoming NFL Draft. Round one is Thursday, and then Friday, rounds 2 and 3, and then we finish things up on Saturday. Before we get started here, just a couple programming notes for you. The three of us will be together again tonight from 7 to 9 p.m. on WDVE here in Pittsburgh, also ESPN Pittsburgh and SNR. We've got what we think is going to be a pretty interesting pre-draft show for you. And then the coverage will be wall-to-wall as usual once the blessed event commences. I'll just run everything down for you real quick here. On Thursday from 7 to 9, Jerry Dulac of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, another guy who's a regular on the Steelers Radio Network. He'll be joined by Dale and Matt on WDVE at ESPN Pittsburgh from 7 to 9. Then from 9 to 11, it's Dale, Matt, and Adam Crowley of ESPN Pittsburgh. On Friday, 6 to 9, I'll be on along with Dale and Matt. That'll be on ESPN Pittsburgh. And then from 9 until it wraps up, Adam Crowley again with Matt Williamson and Wesley Euler. And then on Saturday, the coverage starts at noon to 2, Williamson, Prisuta, Crowley, 2 to 4, Lolley, Euler, Williamson, and 4 to 7-ish, Crowley, Lolley, Williamson. You guys apparently can't get enough of this because
I'm on for every minute of the draft, by the way.
Well,
every pick.
And you're not going to have a note in front of you for any of them, are you? You just roll with this stuff.
Some of us have to also write in between all this stuff as well, so it's going to be a lot of fun. It's a busy weekend, but, man, is it fun.
Yeah, it'd be a nice change for all of us being busy, huh? Anyway, let's kind of put a bow on all that we've been talking about. We've gone through every position and a lot of different scenarios. I think we're all excited about this draft, probably for different reasons. Dale, why don't you lead us off? What's not your hot take, but your all-encompassing, well-thought-out, insightful take?
You know, the more I've studied this draft, Mike, the more I've come to the realization, and we kind of knew this when we went to the Combine, but it's really been driven home to me as I've studied more of these prospects, that this is really an offensive draft. There are some stud defenders in this draft, but, man, they trickle. It ends pretty quickly. You know, maybe after the first 40 picks or so, then you're kind of hoping that some guys fall, or maybe you find a diamond in the rough defensively. But offensively, you're looking at guys through all 7 rounds that could come in and perhaps help you as rookies, which is really unique. You can't say that about the defensive side of the ball. It's just not a very strong overall defensive class.
It's interesting. I hadn't thought about it from that lens. I mean, I often think about it from specific position groups. And Dale, I know you're on board with me too. Tight end and interior line certainly isn't great. But, wow, I mean, there's a dozen tackles in this draft that could play week 1 or certainly in their rookie year. That never happens, let alone 25 receivers possibly that fit that bill, and another dozen running backs that might be in fantasy leagues this year, maybe 4 starting quarterbacks. I mean, that's a boatload at positions that are, you know, highly recognizable. So I'm with you. And it's not that the defensive draft as a whole is bad, but it's just not as deep.
You know, I'm with you as well, Dale, and that leads me to my insightful, well thought out, non-hot take on this draft. And it is, it's almost a question of, I wonder if because it is set up the way it is, if that's going to change some teams' thinking on how they approach it. Mike Tomlin and Kevin Colbert met the media on one of these Zoom press conference substitutes the other day. And here's what Colbert had to say about liking your guy versus depth way more at one particular position than another. And I'm quoting Kevin here. It's all relative. We can always say this player's available, but there's several more we may get down the road. We better look at another position first. you're never going to reach down into a group because there's only 6 that may help you and the other group has 12. If the group that has 12, if that player is significantly better, you take them. If not, you're going to make a mistake. And Matt, I'd be real curious as to your opinion on this, being you're the former scout among us. Is it almost a scenario where when you have multiple needs, you want to play the law of probability, or if there's 75 receivers and you feel like you want a receiver anyway, you're going to take the best one you can get as fast as you can get them?
Yeah, I think it's a fine line. I mean, it depends. I'm a big believer in tiers, that, boy, this is the end of my tier. I can get this guy, or I can wait and get any of these next 5 in the next tier. So obviously the scarcity of different positions, that Dale mentioned as well. And I know this isn't a Steelers-centric, podcast performance that we're doing here, but the smart teams, I mentioned tight end, interior O-line. Well, what did the Steelers go sign right before the draft? A tight end and interior offensive lineman. Some of these veteran front offices are so exceptional, and the Steelers absolutely come to mind at setting themselves up for the draft. I think there's a real art to that you walk in on draft day saying, I know the strengths of this draft. I know I need an interior offensive lineman. I don't want to take a guy in the 3rd round that I have a 5th round grade on, so I'm not going to put myself in that position.
And another thing, kind of a little caveat to my theory or my question, is the draft for years and years and years your best player available. You got to get the best guy.
That's kind of a lie, though.
Nobody wants to pass up the Hall of Fame quarterback.
Somehow the best player available always ends up being at a position of need.
Just about, yeah.
Hasn't it more become it's kind of similar to recruiting or free agency? You don't want to necessarily win recruiting or win free agency. You want to get the guys that are going to work for you, don't you? That's first and foremost. You got to fill your needs, and you got to get guys that do what you do, not necessarily the 5-star or the $10 million a year guy who doesn't fit.
100% right. And again, this keeps bringing me back, which is going to be part of my point, is these veteran stable front offices understand that so well. Like, I often use the example of the year I put in with the Browns. Well, we were a very strict Butch Davis 4-3 team, and I spent 9 months looking at guys through that lens. And then Romeo Crennel comes in and we're a 3-4, and we basically took all those notes and threw them away. Wow. I mean, like, why'd I even bother? So we're looking for Will Forks and McGinnis's and those type of guys. And that's not what we were after at all until the new regime came in. So with the craziness going on in the world, I really think these stable teams, the Patriots, the Ravens, the Steelers, the Saints, even the Falcons, teams like that have had the same systems in place, really have a leg up.
Dale, another theory that I've heard expressed, and it's one that kind of resonates with me. Daniel Jeremiah is among those who have put forth the notion that because of the way things are now, the coaches haven't been traveling. There was no NFL annual meeting in March. Everybody wasn't in the same place. There's not as much, I think the way Jeremiah put it, was commonality of thought. Because, the coaches and GMs and scouts are like we in the media, right? You go hang out at the same places and you talk, you kick stuff around, and eventually everybody kind of ends up coming to the same conclusion just because you hear it so much. That stuff's kind of out the window now, right? I mean,
those days are like showing circles for old ladies sitting there chatting.
Great analogy. But Dale, you hit this first, and then Matt, I'm curious as to your opinion. Now more than ever, we don't know what might be coming next.
Yeah, and that's what makes this draft so fascinating. When you look at it, there are things that are all over the board. One guy that Matt and I have talked a lot about on our show is Ashton Davis out of Cal. Not a lot of medicals on him. He had a groin surgery in December. Wasn't able to work out at the combine, and then was going to run at his pro day. Well, that got canceled. So where's he going to be out on everybody's boards? I've seen him everywhere from 40s all the way down to 100 in different people's rankings. He's a good football player, but those guys with the medicals, you're just not going to know about. And so different teams are going to have those guys ranked differently. I mean, Kevin talked about that when we talked to him on Monday, Mike, that what did he say, 75 guys or something like somewhere in that range, 75 guys that had some kind of medical issue that there's no rechecks this year. So how did
I think it was 74, no 40-yard dash time, 76, no medical, or no complete medical.
Yeah, so different teams are going to look at those guys differently. So this board, this draft is going to be all spread out where, you're going to have, people, if they're looking at one guy's rankings while they're watching this draft and say, well, this guy says that guy's a second rounder and you just got him in a fifth, or vice versa. That doesn't mean that guy was wrong. It just means that there's just not enough information out there that nobody knows. It's a really freaky situation. The other thing that we haven't seen, Mike, all the smoke screens that usually come out before the draft, none of that stuff's out. There's no like, oh, this guy's falling because of this or that guy's falling because of that. All the rumors that you usually see out there, there's none of it this year.
Yeah, the only thing I've heard along those lines are the typical, the Redskins are taking calls on whatever. Of course, everybody's taking calls on everything.
Right. Not doing your due diligence.
Right? But, Matt, getting back to your point about some organizations get this and some don't. In general terms, are there teams that you think would be better suited to handle this kind of odd circumstance and be better at getting the background information and, gleaning at least some of what they don't know that they normally would have known?
Well, I'm going to go ahead a little here. My hot take is the need for speed. That you guys just mentioned 74 dudes didn't run, or we don't have a 40 on it. And I think that very much ties into this conversation, because you watch the combine year after year, and I'm blown away by the times just keep coming down from year to year really, really quickly, let alone 5 years ago. I wish I could see a graph of, 40 times 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I just think they're dramatically increasing. People are better at training. And so many of those poor kids planned on, well, I don't want to run at 10 at night, 11 at night at the combine. I want to go back to my home track that's a little faster. It's a little more comfortable. I'm going to drop 5 pounds in the meantime. I'm going to run 1,040,000 in between now and my pro day. And they didn't get to do that. Gross Matos and Diggs. I mean, there's a long, long list that you just don't know. And there's a scouting theory out there that I believe in, that if I was in charge of a front office, which will never happen, I would have every scout turn in a scouting report the day or right after the player's done playing football. If that's their bowl game, the Senior Bowl, the last time they put in pads, file a report, and then you can still tweak it with your final report, but I want to judge it against that. Like, what kind of speed did you think Diggs had at Bama without knowing his 40? And let's go off those reports. I mean, there's a theory out there. Put the pen down when the football's done. And I think the smart teams will value that, the tape more than all the stuff you hear this time of year. I mean, even the smartest scouts and evaluators, we're all human, and whatever the latest things you hear are hard to ignore. It's just, what have you done for me lately situation. So I still think that more than ever, I think there's going to be a 30 for 30 of the 2020 offseason, going back to the CBA and all the nonsense we thought then, and then running late and all that type of stuff. Then all this hits. And we're going to go, wow, the Steelers, Patriots, Ravens, I mean, they all got Pro Bowlers in the 4th round. How did that happen in this class? We didn't have a 40 on Gross Matos, things like that. So I think it's going to be really interesting to do a case study 3 years from now on this offseason.
Yeah, I'm with you. Dale, anything to add before we call it a preview here?
No, to Matt's point, and I agree with that to a large degree, but you can tell when you're watching a guy if he's fast, especially like the corners and receivers. Let's say you're a cornerback and you're playing against a receiver that we have a 40 time on, and you see that cornerback running stride for stride with him. He's fast. You don't have to see the tape to see that. Those 40 times are just something that you use as a crutch. You see a guy and you see that he's beating everybody on the field with his speed. He's fast. If he goes and runs a bad 40 time, that doesn't necessarily say, well, I guess he's not very fast. You saw on the field that he's fast. You know that he's fast. So I think there's going to be a lot of that. And Kevin Colbert talked about that as well on Mondays, watching some of these tapes that have been coming out from different agents and stuff. You don't trust those. You can't trust those. No. But, you can use them as tools to say, well, we thought he was a 4.5 guy. He ran a 4.6 here. we still think he's pretty fast, but we'll mark that down. But you don't use that as the be-all, end-all. I think 40 time, especially in a lot of positions, might be the most overrated thing in football. Can the guy play or can he play?
Dale, I 100% agree with you, and that was basically my point too. And I think that'd be really easy to say if the draft was in February or March. But then there's just all this nonsense that happens between now and then, and they go look at their boards and they say, but we don't have a 40 time on him. I'm going to take the other guy, just the way human nature is.
Yeah, it should make for a fascinating draft. You guys have both hung around me long enough. There's nothing I like more than a good draft, and we got one coming up. So don't forget, we'll be doing this again tonight, Wednesday night here in Pittsburgh on WDVE from 7 to 9, also on ESPN Pittsburgh and SNR, and then the normal blanket of coverage everywhere you normally find it throughout the draft, including the hits that I'll be doing with Missy Matthews after the Steelers make their picks. Those won't be as live as they have been in recent years because of technical considerations there, but we will be sooner rather than later, hopefully getting up our analysis and our information on the guys the Steelers select. Can't wait till we crank it up again. For Dale Lolley and Matt Williamson, I'm Mike Prisuta, and you have been listening to the wrap-up edition of Steelers.com's NFL Draft Triple Take. Thanks for tuning in. Talk to you soon.